Thank you very much. When I first began choreography as a young choreographer, or younger choreographer, I really just started with body or bodies and light. That was the first thing. And from that point, I started to consider the audience looking at those bodies and what's their position, what's their orientation, and what is the consciousness of their sort of corporeal self, as well as what they're watching. I then became quite interested in performance and actors and characters within my work, and the idea of the self-conscious performance itself. And within that came conflict between performers. But I think an ongoing interest of my work has always been, I guess, the choreography that is outside the body, or the relationship of the moving body to the space around it. And when I first started to try to, I guess, visualize it, I began to use water as a way of showing arcs of movement and amplification of movement. But theatre technicians became very nervous about that. There's a lot of cabling and lights, and I was discouraged in a very strong way to desist from that kind of practice. So after that, I started to work with some people with video projection, but using the movement and the information of movement from dancers to then create the actual projections themselves, or to create light and project that back onto the dancer to see what the effect the movement has on the space around them, including lasers as well. And this began quite a long period of research with infrared interactive video tracking. And it really is, while it's technological, it reveals a very organic aspect of both the body and its relationship to the space around it.
Thanks. Hi. It's great to be back. In 1995, I was taking a hike in Utah, and I came across a dry wash, and at the bottom of the wash there was this little caterpillar, and it was actually transparent. I could see right through it and see the ground on the other side. And it turns out that this changed my life, and I spent the next 2 years trying to make a mechanical caterpillar. And I like math, and so it was an excuse to do some math, It's always a good thing. And I like working with wood, and I just come out of some drawing and painting. It was kind of all kind of came together into this first kinetic sculpture. And it sort of launched about, for the next 10 years, I've been working on these mechanical sculptures. They're mostly overhead. They have a structure on the top with, it's very low tech. There's nothing digital. There's motors and cams and levers and pulleys and string. And one of the things I try to do is keep, not use an opaque plane and not use a box, so that you can, when you're watching it, you can see how it works. It's transparent. And the top part's as important as the bottom part, and played around with a lot of different materials. This one is cardboard, like the kind of fancy cardboard tubes that come with silver wrapping. If you're out just watching water, you'll see waves. And a lot of times, if you really pay attention to them, you'll see how they superimpose. And so adding together waves has been one of the funnest things. And the yellow wiggle adds together a 3-peaked wave with a 4-peaked wave. The square wave adds together 4 waves. It's got 3,000 pulleys and 9 motors that make it work. Another thing, if you're out and just on a really good day when you're just blown away with how beautiful nature is, and you've got some tree that's waving in front of you, it's just the number, the more kind of parts that you can have, the more organic it gets. And so I get into these projects that just have a lot of parts. The nebula in Dallas, Texas is made of 14,000 bicycle reflectors, and the whole thing kind of just wiggles around. And this one you may remember, debuted right here, the yellow spiral. There you go.
And speaking of here, this is where Reuben and I met exactly 2 years ago. And we saw similarities, this information through string or information through video and how it affects what we see. And rather than explaining all of that, we'll show you a quick video of some of the work that just had its premiere in North America on Thursday.
about it being in New York?
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Well, we just came yesterday because we were performing in Portland, Oregon, and it's still on, I think, tonight. It goes to Duke University next week, and it'll be in New York at the Joyce the week after. So if you're interested in coming and you're around there, or in Philadelphia at the end of the month. Let Reuben fill you in on how it sort of began.
Yeah. It was probably, I just saw actually the finished piece the first time on Thursday, and it was absolutely, it's stunning. I was just so excited, and it's, yeah, if you get a chance to see it live, it's really something else. So, yeah, what happened? Like 2 years ago, I was sitting right there, right where you're sitting. Gideon was here, he was, talking about his work and showing it, and I felt elevated. I felt like not only was it stunningly beautiful, it's just visual, it feels like it was somehow offering a view of the world that I only get kind of fleeting glimpses of. And it's kind of like, there's a view that's rich in meaning and significance, and I get little flashes of it, and here it was just sort of exposed, for a little longer, a little more durable time. And I was just blown away. And so I actually saw him a little bit later, and just went up to him and, suggested that we work together. I'll take credit for that. However, to be fair, I was sort of thinking like kind of a weekend, collaboration, with maybe like, a moderate amount of string and, some sticks. And, Gideon, it turns out that's not his style. And he kind of like kept pushing it into like this, it's been awesome working with you. Just kept pushing it into this bigger vision and bigger scope. And we're here. One of the things that we right away realized was that there would be a safe way and a more risky way to work together. And the safe way would be that I would do something that was overhead, and he would do, some dancing that was down below, and they would be related. And the risky way is that somehow, in part of the performance, the dancers would actually be physically connected to the sculpture, and we didn't know how to do that, and that prospect was really exciting to me.
Yeah, when I looked at Reuben's work, it was extraordinary, and this idea that motors and cogs were giving, and camshafts were giving information to this sculpture, which I called a kind of a decoding machine. And when Reuben started to discuss the idea, I thought, fantastic. Let's get this kind of decoding machine to change our perspective of how we see the human body move. And of course, we could both imagine very quickly how it would interpret very directly human movement. But for me, what I really wanted to achieve out of the project was this, I guess, this sense of this sort of psychological shift, this looking at the sculpture with a sense of us imagining that it reveals something emotionally or psychologically of the person connected to it rather than just their movement. And I really do believe we achieved that. So then began this kind of long trips to visit Reuben.
Right, yeah, we have this small thing called the Pacific Ocean between California and Australia. We left sort of feeling like there was potential, but like no idea what to do next. And it turns out Gideon was on a tour and passed through California and stopped in for one day. And this is my shop. Inside of it, I pretty much ruined it by hanging stuff all over the ceiling and being a general pack rat. And we felt like what we had to do right away is just try something. Like not even knowing what we were doing, we just had to try something, anything. And this is actually, this is the first attempt. It's green, it's like green tape on wire. There's a ring.
Yeah, this is just me moving around with Reuben on my iPhone, taking a copy.
And I think after this trip, we felt like there was promise, but we still didn't quite know what we were doing at all. And you came back again, maybe a few months later, and we I'll let this play out. We tried again. And we started drawing a lot, and we kind of came up with this scheme. And the general idea would be that there'd be a rigged, frame up high. There'd be a lot of strings that then went down to a block, and that went to the dancer. So if the dancer moves forward, right, you can imagine the whole thing, rising up. And if the dancer moved back, it would descend. And then we kind of kept playing around with that idea, and we decided to, this is the plan view of it, we decided to connect all of the arms to one side of the diamond. And then we were looking for another axis to sort of add motion together, and we realized that there's an axis going from the ankle up to the spine and back down. And so there's a leg axis and an arm axis, and they get added up inside of the matrix. And so the motion of the sculpture is actually that summation. And then Gideon also wanted you also wanted to have a motorized aspect of it, and so that made things kind of difficult, but it had to do all things, and so we worked on it.
Yeah. Well, I didn't want to lose that beauty of that autonomy of that sculpture. So while Reuben, after these drawings, Reuben set to work making the sculpture, I set to work with my dancers in the studio back in Australia, working. And we were using, one of the composers introduced me to sort of basic chaos mathematics, very basic. But I got very interested in symmetry across scale and sensitive dependence on initial conditions, and working with these number systems to create some movement, imagining the sculpture. But my real problem was, as a maker of dance in the theatre and a making of narrative in directing, was that Reuben's works essentially were installations, and they were kind of gallery-based or public-based kind of artwork. And the time arc is basically a person coming, seeing that sculpture in mesmeric movement, and then leaving at whatever time. And in the theatre, that's quite a different relationship to time. There really has to be a development, a beginning, something developing constantly, and a resolution. So our challenge was to think about that. So what I said to Reuben, I think it was on Skype and an email, was that I think we should build the sculpture on stage. I think the dancers should make the sculpture. I think we should watch it come into place. And then they should invest movement into it. And once it's invested with movement, it takes that on and becomes perpetual, and then it becomes an artwork how we would normally see Reuben's work, and we comment on that. So there's this, and so that's what we set to. But that posed a couple of problems for Reuben in doing that.
Yeah, it was a bit of a, yeah, I was pretty worried. See, I sort of started to work, I think, October 2010, and kind of started with the frame. And at this point, we had gone back and forth, and we had sort of a pretty good idea of what the sculpture was going to be. But while he was doing the choreography, we Skyped a few times, but mostly I was just kind of on my own, and my kind of personal battles with gravity and friction, which seem to usually get the better hand of me. This is a recycled black UHMW, and so I use this for the string guides, drilled holes, a round over bit. And because Gideon wanted to build this on stage, I thought, well, why don't we make all the joints magnetic? And this is the frame of the bottom part, the matrix, and it gets paper taped onto it. So the white part that you saw floating around is just like cardstock taped on. And so magnets have a really steep learning curve. I mean, if you think that magnets are going to make your life easier on some project, you should really think twice. Remember that email you sent me about?
Yeah, that was a nightmare. I literally had a nightmare. I woke up in a cold sweat just seeing the sculpture just cluster and clump together.
And we did. We had to keep working on that. So this is it's got lots of just tons of parts, and this is how the block ended up being. And so the block it's got a motorized part that can be locked out at 0 amplitude, so that the entire motion is the dancer's only, or it can be both, or it can just be the motor. And it was hard I had a real hard time with friction, and didn't barely kind of got it to work in time by doing kind of a last minute, string shift from one kind of string to another kind of string. And it had a tour, which is another huge challenge. They've actually got to set it up and take it apart, and set it up and take it apart again. And so I sort of had to figure out how to break it down, put it in some crates, shipped it to Gideon, and joined you guys.
So we were in my studio in Melbourne, and Reuben arrived with a sculpture, and we put it together. And this is really where a lot of the hard work, continued, and also began on another level, because 5 weeks in the studio, and while both Reuben and I deal with it's kind of intangibles, bringing that to the tangible world and these poetic ideas, I mean, really, most of our work is very pragmatic and practical, and the studio is just a very practical space where we have to work it's quite hard work trying to make that so seamless and beautiful. And we spent weeks, basically, absolutely weeks on this thing. And you know, I have to say, I think it worked really well. And it was really about detail, the big and the small picture. But really, I mean, we talk about it as a collaboration between us two, but this project was a much larger collaboration. The dancers that we worked with are really at the core of this, and they animated the sculpture, and they manifested the choreography, and they were incredible. And costumes by Anna Cordingley, and music by Rob Fox and Oren Ambachi, lighting design by Ben Sistern. And as a group, we were really able to do this thing, I think, extraordinarily well, and we're very, very proud of it. In the last few months, we've been working separately, and we were very surprised because we literally arrived for PopTech, and we were showing each other pictures of the things of our recent project, and there's something very much in common, even though we're working separately. So I think months together had something, had a strong influence, years together had a strong influence.
Yeah, this is
to do with wood.
This is a recent piece. Just I installed it a couple weeks ago. It's a short video, sort of a side of it. It's I think 40 wooden slats that are hollow, and they're driven by two kind of aluminum helices, and it's in Arkansas at a Museum of Discovery. And sort of, if you get a kind of close-up shot, this is sort of what it looks like.
And at the same time, I was working with a large group of people, 60 untrained, almost 60 untrained and 8 trained dancers. They were all singers on this beautiful staircase. We had no idea. I said, get a load of this. And I just want to show you very quickly. So it's something quite similar. So we obviously had a strong influence on each other.
Yeah.
So thank you very much.